Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the growth hormone lecture for our hormones and exercise video lectures. Let's kind of dive into it. I think this one is of particular interest to many. Over the past, I think, 5 to 10 years, there's been a little bit more interest in this when it's come to doping and the use of growth hormone, even just recreationally, as health and fitness in particular, like bodybuilding, has gained popularity. But I might have bad news for you if you had interest in this for those purposes, but we'll get into that in due time. So just to explore what growth hormone is and how it works, it's a polypeptide, so that means it's comprised of amino acids, and we've come across this before so far. I think of consequence, one of the most important things to consider about that means that it cannot just directly enter cells, so it has to be receptor mediated. So yeah, like we've seen before, it doesn't act like a steroid. It acts like a protein messenger. So, because of that, what we can have as a, let's say, downstream result of the release of growth hormone is it can have effects on multiple tissues throughout the body. So, all that a cell needs to have is a receptor for growth hormone, and growth hormone can interact at that tissue or cell level. And sure enough, we see growth hormone in adults affect everything as far as like homeostatic maintenance and let's say like energy levels, so like glucose and gluconeogenesis from the liver. It'll help with protein synthesis and regulating that, as well as muscle growth, which I guess is more commonly associated with, can help stimulate immune function. So like the list goes on. It's quite diverse, and there's even some potential like brain function that it helps maintain and is involved with. So I think the point being that growth hormone doesn't just specifically work at the muscle tissue per se, which I think might be a common thought. Most noticeably in like a developmental sort of perspective, we see growth hormone at the highest levels in adolescence, so during puberty. So that helps spur on our growth and keeps a lot of tissues anabolically growing. So everything from our nerves to muscles to skeleton, bone, and and so this primarily its function as far as growth, development, and let's say day-to-day physiology. Okay, so how does it tie into exercise? That's kind of the next question that we'll explore. So when we exercise, and in particular, we'll see a graph of this, so I'll just touch on it briefly now, but when we exercise at or above anaerobic threshold in particular, we see increased levels of growth hormone, okay, and released. And so it has an effect on building, maintaining, and repairing muscle. But it also is involved in energy management. So those two factors in particular, when coinciding with exercise, are really important. Okay, so everything from fat, but also to glucose production. It's related. Okay, but let's take a little brief picture here because it is a bit of a classic feedback loop, in the sense that it very clearly has things that promote or in a positive feedback kind of mechanism cause the release of growth hormone, but then also has things that will shut it down or act as a negative feedback loop. And we can start with the hypothalamus being the main indicator to cause release of growth hormone at the anterior pituitary. So again, this is growth hormone releasing hormone. It's a very no nonsense name for what it does. So again, from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary, which will then release growth hormone. Okay. From there, it goes out to the target receptors at all the different tissues throughout the body that it affects. And then the liver, in turn, releases something called insulin growth factor 1. So insulin growth factor 1 is interesting. It is structurally similar to insulin, but it has quite a different effect. So the main one primarily is like a metabolic sort of effect, or I guess I could say more anabolic effect on a lot of tissues. So so in particular, if we look at muscle and bone and think more during like a pubescent sort of period of time in life, it will also have a growth factor or a let's say it'll help bone lengthen and muscle coincide with that and grow in unison as the body's going through puberty. I guess that's the muddled long version of the short point that I was trying to make. But I think the other important thing about IGF-1, so insulin-like growth factor 1, is that it acts as a negative feedback both to the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary. So when that gets released, it also shuts down or slows or manages the release of more growth hormone. Okay. So yes, if we had a large release of IGF, we'd have a lot of anabolic kind of promotion through a lot of tissues, very similar to the same ones that growth hormone directly affects, but it will also negatively feedback and therefore inhibit the release of more growth hormone. Might have also seen this somatostatin negative feedback mechanism here. So somatostatin is another word for growth hormone, and that can negatively feedback more production. Okay, so how does as we can see with exercise, like I previously mentioned, there's a really good graph that will help demonstrate this in just a moment. But with exercise above anaerobic threshold, we get higher levels of growth hormone in our bodies. The opposite is true. If we don't exercise as much, if we are more inactive day to day versus active, we'll have lower levels of growth hormone. Similarly, if we have more adipose or fat tissue stored on our body, we are likely to have lower levels of growth hormone as well. So again, and that has to do with that energy management aspect that growth hormone has. So I think that kind of sums all of this up. And if we take a look here at this graph, in particular, we can see there's two. So again, let's just go axis by axis. So here's serum growth hormone, so blood level growth hormones. Here's our exercise. So this is pre, mid, and as exercise ends on two scenarios. And in this first series of exercises, we have a low volume and different rest levels, okay? So there's like a 3-minute break after a set of 5, a 3-minute break after a set of 10, and after a set of 5, we have a 1-minute break. So that's kind of our control. And here in series 2, we have a higher volume, but different break levels. And so what the trend is, or what we'll come to find is the higher levels here, so in green with our lower volume, and then here in blue with our higher volume sets, is that the shorter the rest period, so 1-minute breaks, And the higher the volume, so 10 versus 5, we will see the greatest amount of post-exercise growth hormone. And so what's interesting to note that this is both true for aerobic and anaerobic or strength-based exercising, okay? So this is like strength-based stuff, and we see fairly high levels of growth hormone after our higher volume, lower rest scenario. But if we take a look here at some aerobic levels of exercise or quantities, we can see at this was 70% of max VO2 for individuals, so just below and for some untrained individuals into anaerobic threshold, but over a certain amount of time, even at 70%, you end up crossing into your anaerobic threshold. So again, what we see in these two conditions is as you get higher or beyond threshold, our growth hormone levels get quite a bit higher. And the longer you go, the more growth hormone you get released. Okay, so half an hour, good dose of growth hormone. An hour, significantly more. And if you go for 2 hours, you get quite a great deal more of growth hormone released. And again, that's primarily to help with the repair components of exercise, releasing energy for anabolic muscle growth. And again, I feel I should note that even though this is the case for post-exercise, when they've come to study the supplementation or the more doping side of things with growth hormone, the results for athletes in particular have shown very minimal results as adults, any influence that growth hormone has on performance. So this is statistically speaking anyway. So again, for those seeking maybe a bonus added as far as when it comes to growth hormone, the results, the science so far doesn't really support its use. And in fact, the side effects for use of growth hormone as adults is actually quite bad. There's quite a everything from cancer to psychological issues to and again, this goes to play at the fact that there's so many receptors throughout our entire body that receive growth hormone. So you get a very system-wide or whole body-wide issues and side effects with supplementing or doping with growth hormone. So at the end of the day, if you're really looking for a true mechanism to be able to get the beneficial results of growth hormone from exercise, it is exercising. So again, either going for a longer duration, higher intensity around anaerobic levels for aerobic work, or higher volume, lower rest strength training. Okay.